Hi, it's Keir Bates, CEO of Chainfrog here, on a gorgeous, crisp autumn day in Finland. And today I thought I'd talk a bit about how my CTO and I used to talk about being in a software startup, being very much like being in a band. And then we decided a year ago that actually no, being in a band was very much like being in a software startup. And now I've come to the conclusion that actually the two are pretty much the same. They have different names for things. For example, in a software startup you're writing software, and in a band you're writing music. But for starters, the dreams are the same. Bands think that they may well one day be the next Rolling Stones or the Beatles, and software companies think that they're one day going to be the next Apple or Microsoft. Similarly, in bands you have Battle of the Bands and band showcases, and in startups you have pitching competitions and networking at conferences. And then the next thing happens, that's either talking to the A&R guys or talking to the VCs. Then you get some funding. In the case of a band, it's in advance on the first album, and in the case of a software startup, it's angel investment or Series A, Series B. I guess that's a bit more like making your second or third album. And similarly, if you go the traditional startup route, then you're facing the same problem that bands do, which is that you lose control. Suddenly there's this big machine behind you, and it's deciding what you're going to do and where you're going to do it, what you're going to look like, or in the case of a software company, who you're going to market to, what your strategy is and stuff like that. And you slowly get diluted down until eventually, as a band, you're only getting 1 or 2 euros per album sold, or fractions of pennies per song streamed. And in the startup you end up only owning maybe 10 or even 5% of your company. So going the traditional route means ultimately you're giving a lot of value away to all the machinery and all the apparatus that surrounds the infrastructure of having a startup or a band. The other option, of course, is in either case you can bootstrap, just tour and gig pubs and clubs if you're a band, and as a startup it's don't take any funding and try and use things like social media and things like LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff like that to raise your profile and actually reach out. But there, of course, again, you have the problem that there are plenty of bands out there that play little clubs and pubs and nobody's ever heard of them. And in a startup you have the same problem as well. Without the money, you don't get the exposure, you don't get the user base, and your startup ultimately may not succeed. So back in the 90s I was in a band, and we managed to fail spectacularly by not achieving any awareness whatsoever. I'm hoping with the startup that I now run, Chainfrog, things are going to be a bit different, because of course in the 90s you had to just pound the streets, hand out leaflets and drive around in a van. With a technology startup in this decade, fortunately there's the whole internet, so you can actually reach the world. Anyway, those are just some thoughts on bands versus software startups. Hope you thought it was entertaining, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.